I failed my family again and again, until one night, my mirror showed a version of me who had already succeeded. Why was he trying to help me? I stood in the flickering fluorescent light of my parents' bathroom at 3 a.m., clutching a foreclosure notice that I had hidden from them for 3 weeks, and I prepared to see the face of a failure staring back at me. I expected the bloodshot eyes, the slump of defeat, and the panic of a 28-year-old man who had managed to destroy the retirement of the two people he loved most. But when I lifted my head to look into the glass, the man staring back wasn't crying, he wasn't shaking, and he definitely wasn't wearing my stained t-shirt. My name is Leo, and for the last decade, I have been the anchor that dragged my family ship down to the ocean floor. My father, David, 56, was a man whose back was broken by 30 years of construction work, and my mother, Elena, 54, was a woman whose spirit was broken by watching her husband suffer. They had pinned their hopes on me, their only son, to be the one who finally made it to the calm waters of financial stability. Instead, I had been a tsunami of bad decisions. I had tried everything. I dropped out of college to start a drop-shipping business that tanked in 3 months. I borrowed $10,000 from their emergency fund to day trade crypto, only to watch it evaporate in a week. I had taken loans I couldn't pay back, lied about job interviews, and spent years paralyzed by a toxic cocktail of arrogance and incompetence. That night in the bathroom was the end of the line. The bank was coming for the house in 30 days. I had exactly $42 in my account. I was washing my face, dreading the morning, dreading the moment I would have to walk into the kitchen and tell David that the home he built with his own hands was gone because his son thought he was smarter than the system. I splashed cold water on my face, squeezed my eyes shut, and wished I could just disappear. When I opened them, the air in the room felt different. Heavier, charged with static. I looked at the mirror. The reflection wasn't mimicking me. I was leaning over the sink, gripping the porcelain until my knuckles turned white. The man in the mirror was standing up straight. I was wearing a ripped gray t-shirt. The man in the mirror was wearing a charcoal suit, tailored, expensive, the kind of suit that commands silence when it enters a room. The bathroom behind me was peeling wallpaper and a dripping faucet. The room behind the reflection was sleek, modern, with marble walls and warm, ambient lighting. I froze. I thought I was having a stroke. I thought the stress had finally snapped my brain in half. I waved my hand. The reflection didn't wave back. He just stared at me. His face was my face, but older. Harder. There were lines around his eyes that I didn't have yet, scars of exhaustion that looked like trophies. He looked at me not with pity, but with an intense, burning impatience. What would you do? Would you run out of the room screaming, or would you stay and look at the ghost of who you could be? I stayed. I couldn't look away. For a solid minute, we just locked eyes. Then, the reflection did something that chilled my blood. He checked his watch. It was a gold watch, heavy on his wrist. He tapped it twice, then pointed at me. It wasn't a threatening gesture, it was a command. He pointed at me, then he mimed picking up a phone. He held his hand to his ear, his expression shifting into a polite, shark-like smile. He nodded, mouthed a few words I couldn't hear, and then hung up. Then, the image flickered like a bad signal, and I was back. Just Leo. Just the loser in the t-shirt. I sat on the toilet lid, shaking. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the scene. Was it a hallucination? Probably. But the look in his eyes, my eyes, had felt more real than the eviction notice in my pocket. It felt like a memory of something that hadn't happened yet. The next morning, the atmosphere in the house was suffocating. David was sitting at the kitchen table, rubbing his lower back, wincing every time he moved. Elena was counting coupons, her lips moving in a silent prayer. They didn't know about the bank letter yet. I had 30 days. I went back to the bathroom. I needed to see him again. I needed to know I wasn't crazy. I stood there for 10 minutes. Nothing. Just me. I felt foolish. But then, as I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse out of the corner of my eye. The reflection shifted. He was there. This time, he was sitting at a desk, a large, mahogany desk. He was writing furiously in a notebook. He stopped, looked up at me, and slammed his hand down on the paper. He pointed at the notebook, then pointed at me. He wanted me to write. I ran to my room. I dug out an old, dust-covered planner I had bought years ago and never used. I sat down. I didn't know what to write. I thought about the phone gesture from the night before. I thought about the suit. I wrote down a list. Not a list of dreams, but a list of debts. Every single cent I owed. Every lie I had told. It was ugly. It was 2 pages of failure. Then, I wrote down a list of assets. It was short. I had a laptop, a decent internet connection, and a forgotten certification in data analytics I had gotten online 2 years ago and never used because I thought I was too good for entry-level work. I looked at the list. The successful me in the mirror wasn't doing magic. He was working. For the next week, I lived like an actor preparing for a role. I decided that since Leo the failure was destroying this family, I would simply pretend to be Leo the reflection. I woke up at 5 a.m. because that's when the light in the mirror seemed to turn on. I didn't have a charcoal suit, but I ironed my one pair of slacks and a button-down shirt. I shaved. I combed my hair. I sat at my small, cluttered desk and I treated it like it was mahogany. I started applying for freelance data cleanup jobs, the grunt work of the tech world. It was boring, repetitive, soul-crushing work that paid peanuts per hour. The old Leo would have quit after an hour to play video games. But every time my focus drifted, I went to the bathroom. Sometimes he was there, sometimes he wasn't, but when he was always working. Once, I saw him pacing his office, looking exhausted, rubbing his temples. He looked like he wanted to scream. But then, in the reflection, a woman walked in, someone I didn't recognize, and handed him a file. He straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and put the smile back on. I realized then that success wasn't about not feeling pain. It was about how you carried it. I went back to my desk. I worked 16 hours a day. I took on jobs from different time zones. I was cleaning databases for a logistics company in Germany and formatting spreadsheets for a startup in Austin. My eyes burned. My back ached, mirroring my father's pain. David noticed the change. He watched me walk into the kitchen to grab coffee, dressed in my shirt and tie, moving with a speed he hadn't seen since I was a child. He didn't ask questions. He was too afraid to jinx it. But I saw him exchange a look with Elena, a look of cautious, terrified hope. Have you ever worked so hard that you forgot to be depressed? Have you ever been so busy trying to survive that you forgot you were supposed to be a failure? 2 weeks in, I had made $1,200. It was a start, but it wasn't enough. The foreclosure demanded $4,000 in arrears just to stop the process, and then another $2,000 for the current month. I was running out of time. Then, the universe decided to test me. David collapsed in the garden. I heard Elena scream. I ran out, my heart hammering against my ribs. We got him to the hospital. It was a minor heart episode brought on by stress, but the doctors said he needed medication that our insurance didn't fully cover. We brought him home 2 days later. He looked gray. He looked like a man who was fading away. The medication cost $600. Half of what I had earned. I stood in the pharmacy line, my card in my hand. If I paid for this, I was back to square one with the house. If I didn't, my father could have another attack. I bought the medicine. I walked home in the rain, feeling the cold water soak through my success costume. I felt the old darkness creeping back in. The voice in my head whispered that it didn't matter. No matter how hard I tried, the hole was too deep. I was going to lose the house. I was going to fail them again. I went into the bathroom. I needed to scream at the mirror. I needed to break it. I looked in. The reflection was there, but he wasn't in the office. He was in a hospital waiting room. He was wearing the same suit, but his tie was undone. He had his head in his hands. He looked broken. I stared at him, tears mixing with the rain on my face. Why? I whispered. Why show me this if it ends the same way? The reflection looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. He stood up slowly. He walked to the glass. He placed his hand against the surface. Then, he did something he hadn't done before. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a check. He held it up to the glass. I squinted to read it. It was a check made out to me. The amount was massive, but the date on the check, the date was 3 years from now. He pointed to the check, then he pointed to the door. He wasn't telling me it was fixed. He was telling me that this pain I was feeling right now, the hospital, the rain, the fear, was the price of admission for that check. He was showing me that he remembered this night. This was the night he didn't quit. I wiped my face. I went back to my computer. I had one lead left. A massive, chaotic data project for a regional healthcare provider that I had been too scared to bid on because it required a team. I was one guy. I wrote the proposal. I didn't write it like a desperate freelancer. I wrote it like the man in the mirror. I used authoritative language. I guaranteed a timeline that was borderline impossible. I asked for 50% upfront. I hit send at 4 a.m. The next 3 days were agonizing. Silence. David was resting, but the tension in the house was thick enough to choke on. The eviction date was 5 days away. On the 4th day, my phone rang. It was the project manager from the healthcare company. He sounded skeptical. He asked how a single consultant could handle the volume. I walked into the bathroom. I looked at the mirror. The reflection was there, standing with his arms crossed, chin up, looking utterly unshakable. I channeled him. I lowered my voice an octave. I didn't apologize for being one person. I told him that being one person meant he didn't have to pay for a firm's overhead. I told him I would work 24 hours straight if that's what it took. I told him I was the best value he would ever find. There was a long silence on the other end. Okay, the manager said. I'm sending the contract. If you miss the first deadline, we sue. I signed. The deposit hit my account 24 hours later. It was $5,000. I ran to the bank. I got a cashier's check. I drove to the mortgage lender's office and slammed it on the counter. I paid the arrears. I paid the current month. I had $40 left. Again, I drove home. I walked into the kitchen. David was sitting up, drinking tea. Elena was next to him. I placed the receipt on the table. It's handled, I said. My voice cracked. The house is safe. For now. Elena picked up the paper. Her hands shook. She looked at me, and then she burst into tears. David didn't cry. He looked at me with a mixture of shock and profound relief. He reached out and squeezed my hand. His grip was weak, but it was there. Thank you, he whispered. Leo, thank you. That night, I was exhausted. My body felt like it had been run over by a truck. I went to the bathroom to brush my teeth. I looked in the mirror, expecting to see the man in the suit, expecting a nod of approval, a high five, something. But the bathroom in the reflection was just my bathroom. The peeling wallpaper was there. The dripping faucet was there. The man in the mirror was just me. He was wearing my t-shirt. He had dark circles under his eyes. He needed a shave. I waited. I tapped the glass. "Where are you?" I whispered. "Come back." But he didn't come back. I felt a sudden, crushing panic. I thought I had lost my guide. I thought that without him, I would slide back into failure. I leaned in close to the glass, searching for a sign of the marble walls or the expensive watch. Then, I stopped. I looked closer at my own eyes. There was a spark there. A hardness. A resilience that hadn't been there a month ago. I stood up straighter. I mimicked the posture of the man in the suit. It felt natural now. I realized then why he had disappeared. He wasn't a ghost. He wasn't a guardian angel. He wasn't even the future. He was the survival mechanism my brain had created to keep me from eating a bullet. He was the visualization of my own potential, stripped of the fear and the self-loathing. He was the part of me that knew exactly what to do but had been too afraid to do it. He didn't leave because he abandoned me. He left because I didn't need to look at him anymore. I was becoming him. Is it possible that the heroes we look for are just the versions of ourselves we haven't met yet? That was 6 months ago. I wish I could say I'm a millionaire now. I'm not. I'm still working 16 hours a day. I'm still tired. The suit life is still a few years away. But the house is safe. I've paid off the crypto debt. David is doing better. The stress reduction did more for his heart than the pills ever could. I still have bad days. I still have days where I feel like a fraud, where I feel the weight of the years I wasted. On those days, I go to the mirror. I don't see the marble office anymore. I just see Leo. But now, when I look at Leo, I don't see a disappointment. I see a man who saved his family when it mattered. I see a man who learned that failure isn't a permanent state, it's just a pause before you decide to get up. I realized that the version of me in the mirror was trying to help me because he knew something I didn't. He knew that the only difference between the man in the t-shirt and the man in the suit wasn't luck, and it wasn't talent. It was the willingness to look the ugliness of reality in the face and refuse to blink. I saved my family, yes. But the real victory was that I finally saved myself from the guy the first used to be. The mirror is just glass now. And honestly, I prefer it that way. I don't need to see the future anymore. I'm too busy building it. What do you think? If you saw a successful version of yourself in the mirror, would you be inspired, or would you be jealous of the life you weren't living yet? I'd love to hear your perspective in the comments below. If this story of hitting rock bottom and climbing back up resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to help us share more stories of resilience. Remember, the person in the mirror is waiting for you to make the first move.